Laura, it is such a pleasure to have you on. I'm so excited to get into the nitty gritty of sex magic today.
Right.
And I think about, when I'm talking to my community, my women, and even, in my interpersonal relationships, the women that are the closest to me is we are all, I always say that we're in it together. We're in this perimenopause, menopause, midlife continuum. We're going, what is happening right now to me? Right. And I think one of the things that tends to fall to the wayside, especially moms that are going through this, that are feeling like the mental load and the emotional load, and maybe they're feeling just overtouched by their kids and life and everything, that if there was something that they had accidentally to let go of, it's probably the intimacy. And I think there's a number of things that are happening. One, libido is shifting because hormones are shifting, and they're not just shifting, they're going away is what's happening here. I mean, that's the inevitability, but also they're feeling burned out. They're feeling overstressed. A big research article just came out on how the mental health status for women in midlife and in motherhood and is not looking good. And so I think about all these things that are happening kind of all at once. It's kind of like this eye of the storm. And I know a lot of women are trying to find their way back to that intimacy, to that connection, to feeling safe in that relationship as well. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you come on. I feel like women are really looking for kind of that lifeline. To save their relationship or to save the partnership or even just to feel good again. And so I'd love to have you dive in and hear from you. Is this a lot that maybe you're hearing as well?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I'm so glad that perimenopause and menopause is having a renaissance. When I was starting out, that was really what I was focused on. And that was the topics of my first books. And I started a women's sexual health center. And it was so much of that was around the shifts and changes that happen in perimenopause and menopause. And then that freaking stupid Women's Health Initiative study came out, and I was screaming from the rooftops about how flawed that study was, but nobody was listening. And doctors around the country ripped those women off their hormones unnecessarily. Now, the JAMA article, the Journal of Medical Association, just came out saying that, oopsie poopsie, that was a flawed study. It actually doesn't cause cancer necessarily. And actually, women can have hormonal support. But meanwhile, we've had 20 years of women without that.
A generation of women.
A whole generation of women who couldn't get access. So let's just start there. This is such a great, as hard as it is, this is a freaking great time.
It is a great time. I just picked up my HRT from the pharmacy a couple of days ago. I just think about even the GSM symptoms of, vaginal dryness and intercourse, and even, vaginal atrophy. Like, where did my clitoris go?
Everything starts changing, and when I look at, in a clinical sense, I'm always looking at the emotional factors, and you touched on some of these in what you were just saying, the emotional factors, the medical and kind of physical factors, and the relationship factors, and how they all happen simultaneously and affect each other in a very nonlinear way. So just as an example, you have a woman who's going through perimenopause or menopause. Her testosterone, a woman in her 60s has half the testosterone that a woman in her 20s has. It's slowly declining. So by the time we reach our mid to late 30s into 40s, those testosterone levels are low enough that we have low libido, low sensation, difficulty getting aroused. The estrogen is lowering. So we have, as you said, dryness, thinning of the vaginal walls, shrinking a little bit of the labia and even the clitoris. We have less nipple sensation. We have less lubrication. We have more difficulty getting aroused. Orgasms aren't as intense. That's like all in the physical realm. Not to mention if we're taking hormonal contraceptives, that will start to affect our free testosterone levels. If we're taking antidepressants, which many of us are prescribed for some of the emotional symptoms.
Right. Without HRT, that's the other, that's the option. Right.
And that puts even more of a dampens your libido even more. So that's all in the physical realm. So let's say you're a woman and for physiologic reasons or even medical reasons, you are no longer as interested in sex. Maybe you're also struggling with the stress of being now in that sandwich generation where you're taking care of young or adolescent kids and aging parents. You're trying to manage work and life. You have what Dr. Stuart Malloy coined as the hurried woman syndrome, where, which basically means you have low libido, weight gain, exhaustion, because you're going, and the stress levels are through the roof. So that's happening, right? And then you're less interested for a myriad of very obvious reasons in sex. And then as you are less sexually available, what I call the sex romance stalemate kicks in, especially if you're in a heterosexual relationship. But really, it can in any relationship where one of you has a healthy desire, okay, like a healthy libido, wants sex, and the other doesn't. Typically, the one that still really wants sex, especially as we move into perimenopause and menopause, is really, I'm finding, and I found this over 30 years, tends to be more in their masculine. And I don't mean gender. You could have two women together. In order to have that sexual connection in the first place, there's usually that polarity where one of you is more in their masculine energy and one is more in their feminine energy. And we can talk about what that means. But we all have masculine and feminine energy in us, and we tend toward one end of the spectrum or the other. The one that tends to be more in their masculine energy does the way that they achieve a sense of closeness and connection, emotional closeness and connection, is through the physical act of sex. Mm. And for the feminine, the woman or the person who's more in their feminine, they are inspired to be sexual in a long-term relationship because of the emotional closeness they feel to the person they're going to have sex with. So let's say you're in a relationship, you have no desire, you're not sexually available, you're in a relationship with a man and or someone in their masculine, and they feel less close to you because you're not sexually available. They're not trying to punish you, but they just don't have that means to feel emotional connection with you. And so then they withdraw emotionally. They're not as tuned in, they're not as attentive, they're not as romantic, they're not as affectionate. And then as they pull back emotionally, you're that much less interested in sex. And then they pull back even more. And then we get into that sex romance stalemate.
I call it roommates.
Yeah, exactly. And that can work. Like when sex is working in a relationship, it's just one small part of the working relationship. But when it's not working, it can really start to take on a life of its own and fray the fiber of your connection and lead to lower thresholds for anger and resentment, disconnect, lack of emotional connection. Like you said, living as co-parents and roommates, but not really having a real connection, which starts to put your relationship at risk.
Mm. Yeah, this feels all too real in what I've seen in women that are deeply close to me as well as we're navigating this scenario. I think about the hidden costs of this transition.
Yeah.
And that, loss of relationships is a big one. Leaving the workforce is a big one. I believe that we lose like $26 billion a year in absenteeism and women leaving the workforce. So there's these hidden costs that we don't really talk about. For me on this show, it's always about, the symptoms and how we get you to feel more alive again. But a part of this is very much that sexual energy. I think that the research is showing that orgasms are very beneficial to your overall lifespan and health span. But I know that women are feeling lonely and isolated and disconnected from their partners as well. And that was a big part of why I was so excited to have you come on here. So let's say we do have a mom, a midlife mom who's feeling touched out and who's feeling disconnected and burned out. And she's stuck in the rushing women syndrome. And also it's not feeling super comfortable down there. Her doctor isn't prescribing her vaginal estradiol because for some reason they still seem to think that it's going to cause them cancer, whatever the thing is. I see this all the time. And let's say that they're just exhausted. They're too exhausted to even think about initiating after you get the kids to bed. A good book or a good show sounds a whole lot better.
Yeah. But what I do find is that when women, and I hear, obviously, that's a really normal scenario that you're describing, as sad as that is, that's more the norm than not for the late 30s, 40s, and early, 50-year-old women. But what most women will say is that even though they'd rather be watching the latest Bridgerton episode or doing something else on their to-do list or whatever else,
kidding.
once they get started, they actually really enjoy it. And they think, I should do this more often. And so, I mean, assuming the relationship isn't totally broken down, which can happen.
I think the question that always comes to me is like, how do I get back on this horse?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah. And I think the first thing is that it's a decision, right, that we have to make. The second thing is that you do want to, I mean, we could go on a whole tangent about the medical piece. You absolutely, especially if you're perimenopausal or menopausal, want to get the medical hormonal support that you need. And if your doctor will not address it or prescribe it, you fricking find a new doctor.
Yes,
Because there are many doctors who will, but you have to be, just like with all things, we have to be our own best health advocate and the CEO of our own health. So you have to really do the research, understand it. I've written many books on it. I know you have, really educate yourself, go in with questions. And if your doctor won't address it or won't help you, there are many doctors who will. So don't give up on that piece just because your GP or OBGYN who you've had for 10 years and who delivered your babies won't address it with you. Find a new doctor.
Yeah, I would say I just anecdotally, I'm on testosterone because I had my son at 41.
Yeah.
And so I was an older mom. And I'll tell you what, my libido fluttered away. It just gone. I was like, disappeared, didn't announce itself, just left. And, and it took, gosh, and he's almost 5 now. I was like, is it coming back? Is it ever coming back? And my testosterone levels were pretty low, and so I started testosterone earlier this year, not just for the libido piece, but for my brain, for more motivation, more confidence, more muscle recovery, just all the benefits. Yeah. But it's prescribed for libido here. Yeah. It's not FDA approved, but we will prescribe it for that. And that was one of the things that was more noticeable for me. It wasn't outright crazy, but I was like, oh, look at that. I forgot what
it was like to have maybe a little tingling down there or some response or maybe a thought or a fantasy or an idea of sex and not just flat sexually. Yeah. I mean, I take testosterone as well. I think testosterone plays a role not only in libido, but in genital and nipple sensation, in energy, in general sense of well-being. It's important. And it's really important because a lot of doctors don't understand this and they'll just prescribe estrogen to a woman, especially in menopause, not realizing that, that does not help the libido and response. You have to and in fact, if you take estrogen without testosterone, you're causing less bioavailable testosterone in your system than what you already have.
Right. So it's converting over.
Yeah. So the testosterone is really important, as well as the estrogen and progesterone, if that's indicated. But that's one piece of it. But you need to make sure you have the physical infrastructure to whatever extent you can, assuming it's not contraindicated for some health reason, to really pursue all medical avenues and make sure you're getting the support you need from a medical standpoint. And like I said, making a decision, because it's so easy to just push it aside. But the costs of that, as we've discussed, not only in terms of your relationship, right? Like the way the diagnostics go, you're not considered to have a sexual function issue unless it causes you personal distress. And that works for lots of things. But when you have no libido, you ain't distressed about it, right? What is causing the personal distress is indirect. It's the impact on the relationship. It's, that's the main place we see it. What we're not realizing, because we're so in it, and this is huge for me, and one of the reasons I wrote my latest book, is that our sexuality is intimately and intricately tied to our creativity. And our creativity is key to our flow, our inspiration, our purpose. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom working at home 24/7, taking care of your family, or you're a CEO or anything in between, your sexuality and your creativity are intimately tied. And it's such a huge part of our creative energy, of our life force. And what I see time and time again, like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, is when our sexuality, that sexual energy, the energetics of sex is so powerful. And I'm not even talking about necessarily having it with a partner, right? Like obviously there are huge relationship benefits to having it with a partner, but when you cultivate that sexual energy within yourself, you're cultivating life force energy and creativity that starts to flatten when our sexuality flattens and when we allow it to flatten. So it's a huge part of general health and well-being, not to mention, as you said, orgasms and just sexual arousal is so good for your cardiovascularly, depression, anxiety, headaches, so many aspects of health. Sexuality helps support. So
Yeah, I have chronic migraines. Actually, I have a migraine today and it's okay. We're working it out. We're figuring it out. There's a lot of things that I am doing to try to get them under control, including hormone replacement therapy. But there are nights where I am laying in bed in pain. I can't get to sleep. And because of that, and an orgasm can knock me out. And I
oh,
am
well,
so
it's
deeply grateful.
it's one of the cures for migraine.
Yeah.
There were studies that showed it helps with
Yeah.
migraines. Yeah.
It's definitely it's a tool in my toolbox that I use for my migraines, especially when I'm trying to get to sleep to get rid of them. I want to speak into when I heard about the book Sex Magic, I was thinking about manifestation
Yeah, that's a
magic.
huge part of it.
Yeah, and how you kind of envisioning or manifesting in a moment of orgasm. And I was thinking about creativity and the portal of creativity and what that essence brought to the table, the energy that we can gain from that magic. I know that, again, a lot of my women are looking for the how do I connect back with my partner as well? But also that's the thing I loved most about this book was the idea of like, well, maybe you and your partner aren't necessarily for whatever, maybe you are in a co-parenting situation, or maybe you guys have made an agreement or a decision, whatever that may look like. And it can still be a journey with yourself.
Yeah. And I think often that's where it has to start. Like, especially if you've been in a sexless situation for a while and you guys are like now in this kind of, when you haven't had sex for a long time or sex hasn't been working for a long time, it feels like there's a valley between you and you. And it's so awkward and strange to imagine crossing it or even understanding how to cross it, which is why I'm a huge proponent, not just because I am one, but I'm a huge proponent of sex therapy because that therapist is going to help, take your hands and just like walk you through it, not literally, but verbally.
Yeah, like bridge the gap.
Like, and help you bridge the gap in a way where you don't have to, you can follow the stepwise progression with somebody's guidance who's not going to be freaked out or shocked by anything. And it's all very matter of fact. And the sooner you do that, the easier it is because once all those resentments have built, it's not like you can't fix it, but you have to deal with the resentments before you can deal with bridging that gap. So that's a big part of it. But where you always start, even if you are in couples therapy or not, is to regenerate the sexual energy within yourself. So obviously, you're attending to the medical piece and maybe even some of the emotional pieces, but really tuning back because we shut down from our own bodies.
Yeah. No, yes.
We see a lot of men lose interest in sex because they're turning to porn and self-stimulation. They're still self-stimulating even when they've lost desire for their partner. Most women, when we lose desire, we are shut down from our own bodies and sexuality. Yeah, from the neck down, we are shut down. So a big part of sex magic is learning how to come back into your body, embodiment, inhabit your body, your senses again, which by the way is intricately and intimately tied to your intuition and your spidey sense. As you start to like build these techniques, not only will you feel more in your body, capable of more pleasure and arousal in your body, but you actually have, your body is your transceiver. It's how we attune to the world around us and how we get messages with our sixth senses, our sixth sense. So you come back into your body and then you start to awaken your own sexual energy, right, inside yourself through different, you can do that through self-stimulation. And what I teach in sex magic is kind of an extension of self-stimulation to start working with the energetics of sexual energy. Because even just in a practical sense, if you think about sexual sensation for most people, it's localized to the genital region, right? Maybe to the clitoris, labia, uterus, whatever. Pelvic region. With sex magic, you're learning to move that tingling, warmth, arousal energy through your whole body. So it's an enlivening, enervating, creative force you start to feel moving through and in your body. It's a relationship you first are building back, especially if you've lost it for a while, building it back in yourself. And then you can start to build it from that place with your partner again. And for the manifestation piece, right, that's a huge, I've been a student of the law of attraction for a long time. And my last book, Quantum Love, was how to harness your body's energy to actually manifest the relationship you want. One of the things that's missing in when we talk about the law of attraction or manifestation, like, I'm going to write myself a check for $1,000,000 and then, okay, I have it. Where is it? But what the secret behind the secret is that it's all about the energetic frequency your body is holding. Our bodies are pure energy. We're not solid. We seem solid, but we're actually vibrating atoms. Everything is, right? So if we were to look at ourselves through an atomic microscope, we would see that we are made of vibrating atoms. And you and I and this table and these computers are all part of the same vibrational soup, right? Or quantum soup. We aren't really separate from each other. And what quantum physicists have, and this is what I get into in Quantum Love, what quantum physicists have now uncovered, is that our bodies hold an energetic frequency that is constantly shifting and changing based on our conscious and unconscious thoughts and feelings, A, and B, how much we are in training to or matching the people around us. So if you're someone who tends toward codependency, for instance, like I did for many years, you tend to match everybody else's frequency. You aren't really holding your own. Or in relationships, there's all kinds of fascinating data and science I get into about how we entrain and match each other's frequency. So what Quantum Love teaches you to do is to harness and move your body into the energetic frequency of how you want to feel in your love relationship, how it would feel to have your partner show up the way you want them to. And then they automatically match you there. It's like a crazy Jedi mind trick for your relationship.
Wow, I
Now,
love that.
now, when you're talking about manifestation, right, and that $1,000,000 check, just as an example, if you aren't moving your body into the energetic frequency of she, he, they, who has $1,000,000, how it would feel to have $1,000,000 cashed into the bank, the sense of aliveness, of freedom. Maybe for someone else, it would be excitement. Maybe for someone else, it would be peace, right? Like everyone's going to feel differently when they have that $1,000,000. But if you move your body into the energetic frequency as of how it would feel, and you feel that in your body, that is what charges it into the quantum field. And what is really the secret behind the secret. It's not enough to just write the check. You have to send it out with your body's frequency. Now, think of it as an old-fashioned radio, right? You have the station, which is the frequency, and then you have the volume, how strong the frequency is. So the higher the energetic frequency your body holds, the more supercharged you're sending what you're wanting to manifest out into the quantum field. And what they were able to do through all of this research that I get into in Quantum Love and I get back into in Sex Magic, the most recent book, is that each emotional state our body holds a different frequency. There's a continuum of low to high frequency and of that volume thing. Now, the highest frequency our body can hold is what happens with orgasm, the sense of bliss, and even sexual arousal. That is literally the highest frequency our bodies can physically hold. So when you match that, when you set an intention, and I teach you how to do this in Sex Magic, and this is an ancient practice, thousands of years old, but it really works. When you set an intention, and I teach you how to do it in a way that you can kind of hold the vision of. And then you hold that while you move into arousal, or even while you're having an orgasm, or if you can't remember, right after you're having an orgasm, when you're still in that high frequency state, you are literally supercharging it into the quantum field.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, I wanted to really speak into that because I know, a big part of Sex Magic this was kind of what I thought when I saw the cover, when I was looking into it. And I know you speak really into that sexual energy, but into that creative energy, really into that like feminine wisdom is what I think about. But I was like, oh, I wonder if she goes a step, like she takes it to the next level. And
I do.
yeah.
I do. We get into that. But one of the things to me, sex magic, and that's, I think, what the traditional term of sex magic is specifically around manifesting. But to me, it's about it's about harnessing and mastering the energetics of sex. So you're not just learning how to connect to your own sexual energy and build it within yourself and move it through your body and have full body orgasms, even that go out the top of your head, but you are also learning, if you want to, in relationship, how to circle that energy between you, how to kind of blend sexual energy so that it becomes a really heightened experience. One of the most common questions I get wherever I speak around the world is, how do you spice it up in a long-term relationship? And for most of my career, until I guess about 10 years ago, when I started getting into quantum love and quantum sex and sex magic, was that, I could give you 365 tips, tools, toys, role plays, things to try to spice things up that would work to spike your dopamine levels and to create a sense of excitement in a long-term relationship where that familiarity had kicked in, like it does when we have long-term relationships. That's normal. And then, in a year or maybe a year and a half after you'd done the ones you liked several times, the novelty had worn off of that. And now you need more and more. And this is why so many people are, okay, let's open our relationship. Let's have a threesome. Let's bring, they're doing these things that are putting their relationship at risk in a misguided attempt to bring in more of those dopamine levels. And so for me, what's so clear in everything, all the work that I do, is that everything we want in love, in life, that car, that job, that partner, that kind of relationship we want, how we want things to go with our kids, and whatever it is, whatever we want, what's underneath that is a desire to feel a certain way. Like when I have that car, what you're really thinking is, how am I going to feel when I see it in the driveway or I'm driving it? Or when I have that perfect partner, or my partner shows up exactly how I want, I'm going to feel a certain way. But we rarely get to that. We just think about the want. But what we're really wanting is a feeling.
Yeah. We want that deep connection, that worthiness, that love, that belonging.
Yeah. Or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah. So that's what's so interesting to me too. So when I started asking people, when I get this question, I want to spice it up. How do you spice it up? Okay. So you're spiced up. You have the spice. What does it feel like? What is the feeling that you really want? And it kept coming back to, I want to feel some version of excited intensity or intense excitement, some kind of I want that intense excitement. That feeling of deep connection and intense excitement is what I'm really looking for and what I feel is missing. And that is why I wrote Sex Magic, because when you learn how to move these energies through you and between you, it takes it to a totally different level. It is extremely erotic, extremely exciting, and extremely intense. I mean, you're talking full body connection in a really beautiful way, and anyone can learn to do it.
I love that. So I want to really quickly kind of go back. So we started with women and kind of how we can support them medically. Please find the doctor that's right for you. Please get all the support, get all the tools in the toolbox so that you are feeling more alive and feeling just even connecting with yourself again. And then if it's in partnership, full on permission that you're giving to find a sex therapist. Okay. So that someone can help you bridge the gap and walk you across the big Grand Canyon between you and your partner again. And then connecting back with yourself. Yeah. Permission to connect back with yourself, and then opening the door to the extras of what is really possible here. Not only just the physiological benefits of orgasm and connection and intimacy, but it can be so much more. Yeah. And that's really what the book is stepping you into. So we get these things mapped. And I think that big decision too is deciding. You're deciding that this is what you want, deciding that this is important enough for you to put some energy around, because like anything worthwhile, you're going to have to put some work into it, a little bit of work, but fun work, ideally, right?
And it pays off.
Yeah, there's a payoff.
Not only in your own creative energy and your relationship and your connection to yourself and your body and your intuition and so many health benefits. I mean, there's so many benefits to it, but it is a decision.
Yeah. I want to get into the energetics because I absolutely deeply agree with you, that there's something about that deeper spiritual, sexual energy connection that is just, wow, whoa, it blows away role play and costumes and whatever you're coming up with to spice things up. That's a very transcendent experience. than all of the things that, kind of like the tips and the tricks. I'd love to hear, in terms of working with so many couples over the last 30 years, having incredible experience in this, like, what are some of the really incredible benefits that people gain? Like, what are the things that are like ancillary that they were like, oh my gosh, like I was going into this with just more connection with my partner, and man, life is shifting.
Yeah.
Things are shifting. Like my energy, my creativity, I'm birthing things that I didn't think I had the capacity for anymore. I just curious because I feel like there's so many side benefits to this that women would glean.
Oh yeah, so many. I think when I think about my mother's generation, I'm in my 50s now, so I'm a little bit older than you. But when I think about my mother's generation, they basically got to 50 and then they kind of were done. They were just
Yeah.
sitting
I
there
don't know
waiting.
why we were sold that dream.
Well, I think our generation, even more so than theirs, is the first one, thanks to modern medical technology and healthy lifestyles, who are going to live to 100. So when you think about it, our bodies, evolution hasn't caught up with modern medical technology. So our bodies, we weren't really supposed to live, right? And 100 years ago, or even let's say 50, 75 years ago, the average lifespan was so much shorter. And so by the time you hit menopause, you were kind of on your way out. And now we're going to spend half our lives. And, the average lifespan is 100 years. So the idea is, how do you want to spend that time,
Yes,
right? We're really investing in a healthier lifestyle. We're staying active. We're building muscles. We're getting hormonal support. But to come back to, circle back to your question, to me, and in particular with sex magic, I mean, I am a huge fan of tips, tools, toys, lingerie.
It's a yes and, right? You can have buzz.
All of that. It is all of that. But this sex magic is at a whole nother experience. When I teach this to couples, and in particular to women, it reinvigorates your life force. In Chinese medicine, you would call it qi, right? And one of the coolest things that I learned decades ago from a Chinese medicine doctor is that from a Chinese medicine perspective, the reason the menopausal transition is so difficult is that for our entire lives, our qi is flowing toward our womb. And when we go through perimenopause into the menopausal transition, what that transition is, the qi, the life force, changing directions and now flowing all over our bodies. So this is why in our Western society, the perimenopausal, menopausal woman is kind of considered old and done and not sexy anymore. In most indigenous societies and around the world, she is stepping into queenagerdom. She is stepping into her power and her wisdom. But also, we have not been taught how energized you can be. As your kids are now getting older and more independent, as you're dealing with all of these other stressors, you can be building a life force inside you that gives you energy, that inspires you, that awakens your creativity, that not only allows you to solve the problems and the stressors around you with more grace and more ease, but also heightens your intuition and your connection. That's what we're being invited into. I call it menopause magic. That's what we're being invited into. And so much time, and I'm a big fan of spending time talking about the problems and how to manage those. That's super important. But it's also a portal. It is also a stepping into something that is profoundly powerful. I mean, there is a level of power and creative energy in me and in the women that I teach that no one can F with.
Well, I think about you. I know you're talking about you being in your 50s, so I have a feeling you're probably in menopause at that point. I don't want to make assumptions.
Yeah.
And here you are writing sex magic.
Oh, yeah.
You're really embodying.
Yeah, my sex life is better than ever. And I've been married, I don't know, 25 years, something like that. But I always forget how long I've been married, but a long time.
As long as the intimacy is locked and loaded, I guess it doesn't matter how many years it's been.
Yeah, it doesn't. But it's a really, not only from a sexual standpoint, but from a, because I remember feeling like, you just feel exhausted and drained. And a lot of that is because you need the medical and hormonal support. But a lot of it is even with the medical and hormonal support. It's about tapping in and tuning into this life force that is available to us, that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so even if you don't want to have sex with anyone, even if you don't have a partner, or you don't have a partner you would ever want to have sex with right now, if you, I wrote this book, Sex Magic is for whether you're single or not wanting to be sexual with anyone else and or in a relationship. You can start to cultivate and build this energy within you that is your birthright and is so energizing and inspiring and will create a kind of creative inspiration that many of us never really accessed before, especially in our busy, stressed lives. So it makes everything easier, more flowing, and more inspired. Not to mention, as I said, the intuitive, what starts when you start to really tap in and tune into your body and open those channels, you start to really get guidance that maybe you didn't connect to or have access to before, which is really beautiful.
Mm. I love that you really address the fact that, some people, it is a solo journey and
Yeah.
that is okay. Like there's so much you can gain from that. And for others, it's a partnership journey. It just, wherever you are in your journey, I would say that this particular time in our lives, kind of everything is up for review. So you kind of don't know where everyone's coming in from a different standpoint. I do want to spend a little time for all my ladies that are in partnerships. And I know that in the book, you talk a bit about vulnerability and how that can channel into deeper spiritual connection. I feel like vulnerability can get a little bit lost in this time. There's a lot of shame around women going through this and around the symptoms that they're dealing with and a misunderstanding of what we're going through. And I think that a vulnerability can be lost and a disconnect can get created because of that. And I think with relationships and intimacy, like vulnerability is such a critical piece.
Yeah, in perimenopause and in menopause, especially a lot. I talk about trauma in the book as well and how to address, it's really about addressing the blocks to erotic intimacy and opening for more erotic intimacy. And so if you had a history, and I don't even just mean like massive trauma, we talk about big T trauma and little T trauma, which are just as traumatic, but could be any kind of neglect or subtle emotional abuse or relationship crises or abandonments, those may be some of those littler T traumas that you may not even recognize. There are these ways in which we start to guard our hearts and shut down. And I talk about how to address those things in a healthy way. But then there's also this vulnerability piece, which, of course, ways in which we kind of wall off our heart will prevent. But when you start to open your heart and reveal what's really going on, not only do you feel, and there's been so many studies, I mean, we've all heard of Brene Brown, right? And all that she's written about vulnerability, but many others have done research on this, that when you really expose your truest heart, not only do you feel closer to that person you're sharing with, but they feel closer to you and they are more inspired to be vulnerable with you. And that's one of the keys to intimacy in friendships and in love relationships, is when you are willing to reveal your truest heart, which may be like, listen, I'm struggling emotionally right now, or I really have this need that I'm longing to be met, and I'm wondering if you would be able to meet me there, or this is what I'm wanting or feeling right now. When you start to really, and I give you all sorts of ways to build more openness and vulnerability in your relationship, but when you start to do that, it allows for a level of intimacy that not only makes the relationship so much more satisfying, but your life, right? Your emotional well-being so much better.
I love that. Oh, and I think that'll just hit home for so many women who are looking to bridge that gap as well. And, I know that we talked a lot about kind of, creating that intensity, really the spiritual and sexual energy in this connection. And like you said, you love all the tips and tricks. And I know that you go into some practical exercises as well in the book. So I want you listening, if you're listening right now and you're like, okay, well, is there going to be, I know always like our ladies who are just trying to figure it all out, like the how to and the practicality of getting started. Is there a favorite kind of practical exercise that you love in this journey of, creating more of that energy?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I think half the book is like tangible exercises, step by step, for connecting more deeply to this sexual energy, cultivating the sexual energy within you, building desire, building arousal within yourself, and then how to do it between you and someone else. And in fact, you don't even, when I was developing this and these techniques, which don't come from, I mean, I developed them from ancient techniques in Tantra, Taoism, Kundalini, Kama Sutra, but I kind of repurposed them and created them in a tangible way that your average Joe or Jane could access. But I would practice on my husband, who, by the way, my nickname for him is Senior Root Chakra, because he's so practical and not into the metaphysical stuff and just kind of pats me on my head with all my woo-woo stuff. But I would experiment on him with some of these exercises and techniques and not tell him what I was doing until after, because I wanted to see his authentic response, like what he would experience if I was, for instance, turning on the pink sparkly vagina, which is like one technique, where and it's such a simple thing, but it is profound what an impact. I first developed this for women who wanted their partners to finish, for men who had delayed ejaculation, or just wouldn't finish until they had another orgasm, so whatever their gender was. And so it's basically envisioning moving all your conscious awareness into your vagina, the inside of your vagina, and then turning it into like a swirling vortex of pink sparkly light that's just swirling around whatever's in there. And then watching what happens to your partner when you do this. They will immediately reach orgasm. And I, in fact, taught a woman this in a book group about 2 years ago. And that a friend arranged, and I happened to run across the friend a year later. And she told me that this woman, I had no idea when I was teaching them, she had been struggling with infertility for many years. And she decided to try the pink sparkly vagina that night. And 9 months later, she delivered a baby. She got pregnant, which was pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. I love it.
But I would practice something like that on him and see this insane reaction, like amazing response. And he didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, no, you're doing, this is your vision. Yeah.
I would start pulling, like we were talking about the feminine and the masculine, we can circle so the feminine, whoever's more in their feminine, tends to receive sexual energy through the heart and share it through the genitals. And whoever tends to be more in their masculine receives sexual energy through the genitals and shares it through the heart. So you can actually, even without your partner knowing, you can begin to, let's say you tend to be more in your feminine, you pull that energy from their heart into yours, let it drop down to your genitals and send it into theirs, and imagine it going up to their heart and pulling it back to yours and down into your genitals and sharing it, and you're creating this whole circle. You can do this as an experiment with your partner and watch how they respond, which will be very different than even if you're doing the same thing sexually that you've always done, you will see a very different response. When you're both aware of it and putting intention behind it, it's even more amazing. But even if just one of you is doing it and you're not even telling your partner yet or at all, you'll see a big difference.
I love that. I love that there's so many practical tips that feel very tangible for again, meeting women where they're at, or meeting partners where they're at in this journey. I have a kind of out of the box question I'm very curious to ask you. I'm an avid reader. I'm a fiction reader. And I kind of joke that the new midlife crisis is romantic fantasy books. And so I was wondering kind of what's your take, Laura, on all of these readers, all these midlife women, even younger women who are reading these romantic fantasy books. And I don't know, you feel, is it a good thing that women are feeling a little bit more fired up by these kind of books? Or do you find, maybe it's more escapism? I'm just curious what your take is.
I think it's both. Remember Harlequin romances? You might be too young, but Harlequin romances were like the original romantic fiction in the 70s and 80s. They were like the first romantic fiction.
The first ones I ever remember were Danielle Steele.
Yeah, that was after Harlequin.
That was after her. I had a feeling.
Yeah, but so they were the originals. And I remember, I was in graduate school in the 90s when this study came out that they had sponsored that found that women who read romantic fiction have higher libidos than women who don't. And there have been a couple of studies since then who have shown the same thing. And I think it's honestly, I always say that porn, is made by and produced by and for men, typically, and it is not what turns women on. There is a few female porn makers. They don't have a big consumer base, but really female porn, the difference between female porn and male-oriented porn is the female porn has a plot and a buildup. And that's what we're really looking for. So I think with romantic fiction or romantic fantasy, it's part escapism, but it's also like unfettered, unpressured, our version of porn, of fantasy. We can step into this fantasy where there's no pressure. Everything's, yes, there's always a tragedy or
Oh
a
yeah, there's always a big plot and
challenge.
there's world
Yeah,
building and
yes,
tropes like enemies
yeah,
to lovers or,
yes, yes.
like forced proximity or whatever it may
Right.
be.
But then it comes to this beautiful romantic
Yes.
bodice ripping ending, right? And I think it's a catch 22. I think it's a beautiful thing and partly our response to being indoctrinated by Hollywood to have this kind of fantasy, right, around relationships. And it's not an either or. And also, it's attending to all the things we really long for: tension, excitement, inspiration, feeling seen and wanted and desired, and a chase, and someone knowing exactly what to do to our bodies and being able to respond in this way that we really long to respond. So I don't think it's just like I would say to porn. I don't think that porn is unequivocally bad, evil, wrong, although there are lots of things wrong with it. It's when it starts to inhibit your capacity to be sexual with a partner or your desire to be sexual with a partner that it really becomes an issue. And I think it's the same thing here. I think it's our version of porn.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I was just curious. It's so fun. I just see, I mean, I feel like romantic fantasy and fiction like saved Barnes and Noble. Yeah, it's
Saved
so
a lot of things. Yeah.
the amount of these books that are being sold, I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of copies. It's fascinating. I love fantasy and I love fiction, and it's really an interesting thing to watch. Reading retreats around the world are sold out. And I was just, I was kind of curious where you stood on it. I want to go back to your books, my final question. And that kind of a question I always love to ask is, what do you hope readers are going to take away from this beautiful book that you've written?
I hope they'll take really tangible tips and tools that will revolutionize. I think it does. I mean, this is what I've learned because I've been teaching couples this for many years now, and it really changes everything. It changes the way you inhabit your body, it changes the level of creativity with which you live, it changes how aroused and orgasmic you can be, it changes the quality and connection in your relationship. So, really, what I hope they take is even just one of those, right? Even just opening your mind and heart to the possibilities of what you can create in your sexual life, even separate from your partner or a partner, what you can create inside your own body, especially in midlife and beyond, where we really, I want people to know that you are not done. You're just beginning.
Yeah.
You're just stepping into a new level of power, creative inspiration, wisdom, connection that wasn't as available to you when you were young and still discovering who you were and dating and figuring out your person and having kids and being caught in the mire of raising kids. Now you can start, and even if you are still in active child rearing, and that's when I started all of this, it totally changed my sense of power and intuition around parenting. So there's a whole world available to us that I hope Sex Magic can be one of the bridges to for women.
Ah, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to have the link to the book. We'll have the link. Where else would you love for us to find you? I know you have an
Yeah,
incredible podcast.
I do, The Language of Love. But when you get Sex Magic, and this is going to be going on for a while after the pub date, you go to drlauraberman.com/sexmagic and you just put in the receipt number and your name and email, and you will get my Quantum Sex 8-module course for free. You get my Sex Magic Ritual Journal. You get to come to a live Sex Magic initiation event. And if you want to, you can be entered into a raffle for a one-on-one session with me. So there are lots of free good gifts with the launch of the book. And people can find me on social media everywhere at Dr. Laura Berman.
Perfect. Well, we'll have everything loaded. I had a feeling you had lots of goodies and lots of gifts along with the book. So grateful that they're going to still be available for a while. And so I'll have all of that. And Laura, honey, it's been the deepest pleasure to get to have you here on the show, to get to share your wisdom. And I just want to say thank you so much for writing book number 10.
Yeah,
here we go.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to reading yours too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.